Hey, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. So yeah, what are you up to now?
Well, I'm sitting down for an interview with this guy named Will Sommer.
Sure. So you were in what, Scottsdale or Phoenix or
Yeah, Scottsdale.
cool. And so it's been a couple months now since you've been out, right? Maybe 1 month.
Yeah, about a month and a half.
So how do you like being out?
Freedom is nice, that's for sure. I tried to make the best of my prison situation, so I made a lot of friends, ran a little prison commissary store. You know, spread the Q message amongst the inmates, which was very popular, especially once the Bison Horns guy Jake got arrested. They started calling me the Jefe of the Q cartel in there, which I thought was pretty
Really?
funny because I mean it's like 70% Paisa, so that was like a Paisa joke.
Really? So they, yeah. I mean, so how did they react to hearing about QAnon?
They reacted pretty well. Most people like kind of had no idea what I was talking about, but I got sent in some email clips from the Amorphs archive and just some other like supporting materials, and so it was interesting to have various little beta tests for various little communities of like who cares about what and how can we bring everybody into our big tent here because that's kind of the idea.
Okay, great. Well, so I mean, I think Michael's mentioned, so I'm working on this book about QAnon, and I think obviously you're very, what you're doing in Arizona with the SMG, I think is an interesting aspect of QAnon, and so yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm up to. So just to explain, I guess, my project.
Understood. So what do you got so far?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I mean, kind of a lot of the classics. We got, QAnon in the pandemic. We got, QAnon, and crime. Sort of families in QAnon, that kind of stuff. And I don't quite know. In a way, you're so unique. I think in QAnon lore that I'm not quite sure where you fit in, but I think hopefully I'll we can figure that out together and. I can because I do think what the whole the thing you're on is very interesting. So I think I'd be doing the readers a disservice if I didn't include you in it.
Well, happy to help you hash that out. And I understand you're likely going to take a skeptical position, and that's absolutely fine with me. But
Great.
just don't mind, mixing up with whoever. So
Cool. So yeah. So I mean, if you could tell me, how did you first become aware of QAnon?
a few days before it started, I was in Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
and I got a drop of kind of a briefing of what that was going to be.
Okay, so you were already like part of this, like it would be fair to say, like in the intelligence community.
I'm more of like I'm not like an official part of it. I'm more of like a slapstick computer guy that is like a external subcontractor that they use from time to time. So I was aware of it early on. And if you look back on like my Facebook during 2016, we were doing this thing called Burn Back, and a lot of the media out there likes to say this was a Russian influence operation. But essentially, what we were doing is we were chopping up WikiLeaks into small clips, and we were taking it from various standpoints. So from the war files to the civil rights and racial stuff to healthcare, kind of like something for everybody. We were chopping that up and targeting it towards hyper narrow segments of the left and using hashtags, trending hashtags, and then click farms and robots to get that into the feeds of very selected lefties. And we were very effective in getting a lot of them not to turn out. So like black people in Milwaukee, for example, I had a friend that played in the NBA at the time, and we were very effective at hyper targeting these keyword email clips showing the things like the Clintons, when they were running Arkansas, created an official Confederate holiday, or some of the just crass language they use about African Americans in general, and hyper targeting that into black people in Milwaukee and making them see like, hey, screw this lady, she's not for us. So they like to make a big stink about the robot operators in like Macedonia and stuff, but really those were just people off of Fiverr, right? Like it wasn't that crazy. So they're making a big deal about it, but it really wasn't a Russian thing; it was an American thing. So
Okay.
where that applies to QAnon is if you look on my Facebook, a lot of the kind of like style and language and some of the phrases that I used kind of like carried over into QAnon, like on the board.
Okay, so you're at this meeting and they say what, like QAnon starting in a couple days?
I can't say exactly what was said, but more or less.
And so when do you start to think that you're Q?
Well, I knew I was like I'm part of the Q team, right? So I'm not necessarily the guy running it all. Like me right here, right now, is not the guy running at this moment in time. I'm more of like a field operator. But it was designed to be like styled around burn back, kind of what we did in 2016. And I had thought, I would talk about a lot about the quantum stuff. I thought that was kind of a bunch of silliness. Usually if you ever work with anybody in the intelligence community, they'll tell you like, mostly truth, but they'll throw in some like flamboyant lies in there so that if you leak, everybody knows exactly where it was leaked from. So I originally had thought that was the case. And over time of working with this stuff, I realized like, man, this is actually what they're saying it is. And it's effectively a time warping computer and a time warping internet interface where somebody, 20, 30 years from now in the future could be sitting in their kitchen and post to forums of today.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you're what you and your followers believe is that Austin Steinbart from the future is sending these Q clues back to us now, and I feel like I'm probably oversimplifying that, but I mean, is that correct?
That is correct, and it sounds pretty out there. So the example I like to use is if you were to go back and tell people like 50 years ago that FaceTime would be a thing, right? I would be able to talk to somebody on the East Coast or even in Australia. We have people we work with in Australia that I could have a face-to-face conversation with them with zero latency and with HD quality and be kind of like I'm sitting in the same room. They would say, "Oh, you've been watching too much of the Jetsons," or "Oh, you've been, you're doing a little science fiction stuff." So it's technology that's out there that's coming, and it definitely I would say that's the most out there sounding aspect of our message, but that's absolutely what's going on.
So then, at what point do you decide to sort of gather this group of people around you, and you had this operating base Geronimo and all this stuff?
So I was nudged, you might say, to come out and put my name on this and like have there be a person, a place, a source. I was not crazy about that idea in the first place, just because a lot of the negative repercussions that have happened to other people in the past, specifically towards individuals who talk about an entity called D6, which is the covert paramilitary wing of the CIA. People who have tried to report on that in the past have not fared well, so I was not particularly crazy about doing that. But essentially, it was designed to be, a support network, a human blockchain, and a demonstration of how many different sorts of individuals we have coming into this movement. So kind of the style of the boards was designed to be vague enough to appeal to a lot of different groups of people. So as if you're writing a book, you probably are aware, we got kind of the traditional like evangelical right that's very drawn to it. We have like the UFO disclosure community, which is traditionally like a left community. We have the spirituality community, so like tarot cards, spirit crystals, so on and so forth. We have gamers. So we have all these various, I would say, political constituencies that the board posts, they were designed to be vague enough to allow all these different groups to kind of cast their own ideas, preconceived notions onto what was happening, but specific enough to kind of breadcrumb trail them in a generalized direction and kind of trying to bring everybody together and start paddling in the same direction. So I would say as far as like getting a bunch of different sorts of people paying attention to this, it was a very effective thing. And then we're in the process of just trying to, essentially operationalize that grassroots movement and get these groups of people to come together and realize like we're not all that different and a lot of us want the same things and we should move forward towards that end.
And so what are those things that you want? I mean, when you say you're all moving in the same direction, I mean, towards what?
Biggest one is an Internet Bill of Rights. So as I demonstrated in my FBI situation, your right to free speech does not apply to the internet, right? So all the lawyers were telling me that entire time, if I would have done the exact same sort of speech, if I would have said the exact same things, standing on the corner in front of Dada's office versus on a YouTube video, there's absolutely nothing they could have done to prosecute me because that would have been First Amendment protected speech. So it was a demonstration that our rights don't necessarily apply to the internet. The other thing is recognizing that social media is the de facto public square now, right? So having a social media account is an essential component to be able to participate in the modern political conversation. So in the same way that the power company can't censor you for your political opinions, like they can't turn your power off, the phone company can't shut off your phone because they don't like your political opinions. The social media companies, they cannot restrict your access to social media because they don't like your political opinions. Right, so that's kind of the idea there. And that's very important, we feel, for a lot of different reasons. So essentially regulating social media like a public utility.
But surely there's a larger goal behind, QAnon and the quantum computing and everything like that.
Yeah, so that's one of our goals. Another one of our goals is to break up the CIA and move the good people into DIA and not have a out of control CIA anymore. That's kind of running around starting fires all around the world that we then have to engage with militarily and waste a bunch of our tax dollars and American lives. Another one is to reform the FBI from the ground up and federal law enforcement in general. And the idea is kind of one of the things I was talking about before I went in there is that we really connect with some of these lefty groups because we're trying to go in there and say, hey, look, so Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy, a lot of these people that are essentially leftist heroes, right? What happened to them is that the FBI deemed them like Russians, communists, subversives, right? So they put them in this category that's essentially a category of foreign enemy combatants. And what that did was that opened the legal door for them to be teeing off on those people, spying on them without warrants, sending people to follow them around and spook them out, and in a lot of cases, even going as far as killing them extrajudicially. So we don't believe that the FBI should be in charge of counterintelligence whatsoever. We believe that should be a DHS thing or something, a completely other entity. And we don't believe that you should just be able to label American citizens as counterintelligence threats willy-nilly, as is the case right now. And you've seen with kind of the FISA courts, right? So the FISA courts, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it's like 35,000 or some odd FISA warrants that have been taken out over the past decade, and 6 have been rejected. So essentially, that's not a adversarial process, that's a rubber stamp. Right, that is the judges just letting the law enforcement do whatever they want to whoever they want for whatever reason they want. And so we're trying to reach out to a lot of these groups on the left and say, hey, look, a lot of these nefarious elements of the law enforcement and intelligence community have been targeting you guys for a long time, and now they're targeting us. Now they're targeting people like Donald Trump with this fake Russia thing, right? So they don't like someone, so they're essentially going to make up a story that he is a counterintelligence threat, and they're going to use that to not just investigate him endlessly throughout his presidency. They're going to use that to as a leverage to get warrants on some of his most virulent supporters and go after them as well. Right? So that's the most insidious element in my mind of the Russiagate thing. Wasn't just that they went after the duly elected sitting president of the United States. It's that they're saying, since this is a Russian operation, a lot of the people who support him or are using things like WikiLeaks to I guess spread the message that he's the lesser of two evils. Now they're counterintelligence threats too, and now the FBI can just kind of like tee off on them and do whatever they want with them as well. So that's a pretty wild situation and pretty unacceptable in an American system. And so that's one of the things that we're really looking to rein in as well. So from my perspective, ending foreign wars, reforming law enforcement, reforming intelligence, Internet Bill of Rights, things like that, I would think would be very appealing to Democrats or like modern lefties, right? And I feel that they've just been so triggered by Trump that they're not necessarily able to like take a breath and see that like, hey, What these guys want is actually what we've wanted for a long time. Like a lot of the stuff is like traditionally what we've talked about for a long time. And I would say to people like you, no one has been more effective in persuading Republicans that these foreign wars are a racket, that the CIA and the FBI are out of control, that so private companies or social media companies need to be regulated like a utility. Nobody's been more effective at that than the Q operation, right? So I would think that if you came up in as a Democrat, right, you're like a classic liberal, that you would, whether you'd agree with every single facet of the Q movement or not, that you would see that as a thing that's taking, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of Republicans and moving them towards a like classical liberal position, right? And not this violent, right-wing extremist sort of threat. Obviously, the various groups, like I said, are able to cast their own preconceived notions onto it, right? And the vagueness of it kind of allows for like different tribes to develop. So some of the tribes, they still are seeing this just solely about Donald Trump, right? And I don't see this as a solely about Donald Trump thing. I see this as like an entire United States thing. These are just some of the fundamental things we need to do to be successful, into the next century here, and not just collapse and fold into ourselves.
Okay. So when when you're told to, or convinced to go public as Baby Q, how do you go about that? I mean, because you're a guy somewhere in Arizona, I think. And then, do you make YouTube videos? I mean, how do you start like getting the word out?
Yeah, so it's really challenging, right? Because it's like, all right, what do you explain to them? Well, everything, the big picture. Essentially, like the Q movement has like breadcrumbed a lot of things. So how do you like tie that together? And how do you do that in a way on a forum like YouTube where you can keep people's attention long enough to convey the information? Obviously, it's a lot of very granular information. And how do you do it in a way that makes sense? So kind of my videos were zany YouTube style of like, we have 10-second attention span. So try to be a little funny, try to be a little, animated, try to use some flamboyant language and try to, describe this vast, I would say my main connecting the dots message is that Black Ops 101 video, right? We're just talking about the covert paramilitary wing of the CIA and how we're like deeply entrenched with the United Kingdom and how those royals still are effectively in power of a lot of the world, right? So from where I'm sitting, I don't see it as this, these insidious forces that kind of clawed their way to the top through a conspiracy. I see it as these insidious forces that have just always been there and pretend like they're not there anymore. But if you look at it, the Queen of England is she's the head of state and the commander-in-chief of the military of not just the UK, not just Scotland, not just Ireland. She is of Belize, of Jamaica, of Australia, of New Zealand, of Canada, right? So if Canada wants to send troops somewhere, that has to be signed off by Queen Elizabeth. And I think a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of people don't realize how all that works. But there's this very insidious form of modern colonialism going on, one that even affects us to this very day. Because one of the big things I talk about, and one of the big prominent themes of the Q drops, is the idea that when the FBI wants to go spy on people without a warrant or do illegal things, they just hop on a plane and fly to London. And then they tap into the GCHQ signals intelligence, and we have that Five Eyes agreement with them to where they can just have NSA-like spying power by just flying to London, and they don't need a warrant, right? Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of meddling, I would say nefarious foreign influence in our politics. And I wouldn't argue that Russia is the primary threat. I wouldn't even argue that China is the primary threat. I would argue that the UK and those royals are the primary threat. And they kind of racialize people up, divide them into like colored camps, and pit them against each other is a very royal sort of a thing to do, right? That's a very medieval sort of politics. And it stems from the fact that if you are a single family and you want to physically hold control of an entire country, right, there's no way you can do that if they're united against you, right? You got to pit them against each other, so that way you're the one that's breaking the tie in every case. In the United States, it's more of a 50-50. Back in like Victorian England, there was a lot of different groups, right? So if it's 49.5% versus 49.5%, then the 1% is always the tiebreaker and always the one actually in power. And we're just getting used and abused and spun up into, I feel a lot of like modern politics is word games, right? So we never really argue about substance, or not always, but most of the time we're not arguing about substance. We're arguing about, oh, he said this, she said that, oh, they have this sentiment. So it's really like very unsubstantial things that are most of what our culture wars are. And I think if we could try to rein that in and actually talk to each other, I think the left and the right agree on a lot of areas. I think the traditional left and the Trump Republicans, we all think these foreign wars are out of control, right? And so I think we could work together to rein that in and to actually pressure our political leaders enough to like say like, no, you're pulling them out now. We're sick of this, and we're not just going to ignore the will of the voters anymore, right? And we get hustled because we get pit against each other. But if we can work together and we can kind of triangulate, then we can really achieve some dramatic results quickly. And that's just one example.
So how did your family members react when you started saying that you were Q?
My mixed results. Because some of them kind of like had an idea of what was going on and had an idea of like I was into like some extra stuff. I wasn't just doing IT stuff. I was really into like this like intelligence and foreign war stuff. So my dad, for example, worked. He would sell the Raytheon directors of engineering, the software they would use to design the electrical components in their missiles and bombs. And so as the war in Syria is breaking out, I have all these social media posts, all these live leak videos, and I'm going to them. I'm like, hey guys, what is this? Right? This is TOW missiles, right? And there's hundreds of them flooding the battlefield with clearly these are jihadist elements using them, right? Head chopping takfiris essentially, screaming, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. The moderate rebels, as the CIA likes to call them, even though they're not moderate at all. So I just showed them video after video, and at first they're like, well, how do you know that's real? Or like, how do you know that's this? And it's like, there's just so much overwhelming evidence that you can see through open source intelligence, through social media, through live leak, through wherever. Like, there's hundreds of what does a TOW missile cost? $2 to $2.5 million per shot. How are these jihadists getting 400 TOW missiles, right? If you are with the Marines, they would hesitate to shoot a TOW missile at something that's not, a worthy target because it's such an expensive thing. And you got these head chopping jihadists just using it on an unlimited basis, right? So there's TOW missiles. There was those Grail Strela surface to air missiles, right? So you can lock onto a heat signature and you can shoot planes and helicopters out of the sky. And these jihadist elements in the Middle East all seem to magically have all this stuff. Like, how do they get that? How did ISIS storm across Syria and Iraq and just rout the military like it was nothing? Well, they were armed to the teeth, and they were armed to the teeth by our intelligence services. And kind of the thinking there is, so we have that open-ended authorization for military force after 9/11, right? Anywhere there's terror, we can send the military, and there's no congressional approval needed. And so the CIA ends up going around and arming all these jihadist groups, right? People that would be really nobody without our support, and gives them, anti-heavy armor and anti-aircraft weapons. In ISIS's case, there was tanks, there was vehicles, right? There was 50 cal machine guns. So we take a bunch of nobodies and turn them into a formidable threat, and then now we got to go send the military there to go take care of it. And we do this all under the guise of altruism. And I think one of my favorite clips in the WikiLeaks emails was an email from Sidney Blumenthal. I call him 00 Sidney because he's Hillary's little spy agent around the world. One of my favorite clips was he said, the humanitarian motive offered is limited. He's talking towards the situation in Libya. Read the poll, win the war, no way out. Right? So we're pretending to be humanitarian, but we're not really doing that. We're doing this so we can look tough, right? We're standing up some jihadists, and then we're going and smashing them so that we can look tough, or so that we can overthrow the government we want to overthrow. And really, this is all about, to look strong to a domestic audience, right? What more? It's not even like we're going to go steal their oil or we're going to make them stick with our currency. It's like we're literally doing this so that Hillary and Obama can look tough and get reelected. And I feel like there's nothing more insidious than that. And that's a example for Democrats. But as part of this Q thing, we're trying to show everybody like this is a bipartisan thing, right? We could go name examples like this with the Bushes. John McCain was, this is a big feature of my Black Ops 101 video. John McCain, in a lot of the cases, was the CIA's interface between organized crime and those terror groups and the U.S. military, right? So he would fly to Eastern Europe and go buy them a bunch of those anti-aircraft missiles, or he would get them from the U.S. Army or from Raytheon a bunch of those TOW missiles, and he was the one actually out there chopping it up with them, interfacing with them, and facilitating that directly.
Okay. So, I mean, so generally, I mean, in terms of your family, I mean, were they like, this guy, what is Austin talking about? I mean, I think in the police report or the indictment or something, they say that, members of your family wanted you to get this brain scan, and that's how you ended up at the Amen Clinic.
Yeah. So the Amen Clinic thing was about Adderall. My mom had read a bunch, like I took Adderall for a long time because I'm kind of a little ADD squirrel, if you couldn't tell. So I didn't think it was a problem, but she started reading articles about, all this crazy stuff. So she kind of got this idea like, oh, this is so terrible and you need to do something else. And so she had researched, she watched a bunch of TED Talks. I guess the Amen people gave a TED Talk. So she just bugged me relentlessly to go to this Amen clinic. And the idea was that they would do their holistic process and then they would give you a naturopathic alternative to Adderall. So that was essentially why I was at Amen Clinic in the first place, because my mom was bugging me. She said, I don't like Adderall. I want you to get on something more natural. And that was essentially the genesis of that.
So then why did you, I mean, I guess I'm just curious what motivated you to then to film all those brain scans and put that online?
So the idea was I was sitting in this waiting room, right? And I, with 2 clicks, with no hacks, with no password, with no anything, right, at a computer that every customer comes in there and is left with unattended for like an hour, I can minimize one window, and on the desktop there, right, there's access to the patient files. Not just the patient files, the NFL patient files, right? So people like Terry Bradshaw. So as a patient of that clinic, and as just somebody who's interested in the cyber negligence of people in a lot of different ways, and we could get into that later, I thought that was a newsworthy item of public concern, right? This world famous clinic, you go here and they're just leaving everybody's records out to dry, like not HIPAA compliant at all. That was one of the ways the FBI was incorrect, and that we would have litigated out at trial, but they kind of like shook me down and wouldn't let me get to trial. They just kept delaying. But the idea there was that I, as a patient of this clinic, have a vested interest in this cybersecurity of this clinic. I chose Terry Bradshaw, right? That was the main one, because if you go on his Wikipedia page, he'll already say, I go to the Amen Clinic. Here's what's wrong with me. Here's whatever. And he's a very like famous, prominent, like flamboyant example, right? So I didn't feel I was like disclosing anything that wasn't already public information. And I felt like this was a newsworthy item of public concern. And that if you don't, make flamboyant examples like that, then they just kind of like ignore you and say like, oh, that's not happening, and look the other way. So that was the idea.
Well, I mean, I feel like if I'm recalling the video right, I mean, the argument was that because you're in the DIA and because you're linked up with the Q team, you were able to put this stuff out there and wouldn't be prosecuted.
Well, I in the past have gotten away with a lot. I think in that case got maybe a little convoluted with I didn't explain well why I was doing this versus why I was doing other things, and so I'm here clarifying that now.
Okay. Well, I'd also be curious. I mean, what else have you gotten away with?
Well, I've gotten to experience one of the things that I guess to give you some background. One of the things that I am talking a lot about, and actually interested a lot of the people in that prison because they've dealt with this too, is that the CIA and the FBI, the CIA, they run a lot of the organized crime, or a lot of the organized crime, like especially the Mexican drug cartels. If they want to operate in the United States, they pay the CIA their cut, and they essentially kiss the ring, and that's what the CIA in a lot of cases their off-book black ops budget is based off of. So they do a lot of like facilitate a lot of the drug dealing in the United States. And if they're about to get caught, right? Obviously, they got to throw some low-level people to law enforcement to stay fed. They got to stay in their lane. They got to defend their turf. So there's a few things they got to do with the CIA in addition to just paying the percentage. But as long as they follow the rules, essentially, these cartel people, and as long as they send some low-level grunts to keep law enforcement fed, then any other stuff they're doing, our federal law enforcement will be stood down. So a lot of Border Patrol agents I've talked to, especially in the Yuma to Vegas corridor, complain all the time about, hey, we're about to go catch these smugglers in the desert, right? And they got this huge load. And we'll get a call from the FBI, and the FBI will be like, oh, that's an intelligence operation, stand down. Right? So this happens over and over and over again, like multiple times a week. And so it's very demoralizing to a lot of these Border Patrol people. So that's what's called a stand down order, right? And in the past, when I was learning about stand down orders, I had, drugs in my car, and I got detained by Border Patrol, and I got out within 10 minutes.
So you would be bringing drugs from Mexico?
Yeah, it was only a couple times, really, just to teach me that was actually a thing.
What kind of drugs?
It was just marijuana.
And how, like, in what kind of amounts?
A few pounds.
Oh, okay. So that's like, a decent amount of weight. Yeah.
Yeah, just it was really more to like so that I would have personal firsthand knowledge of how this works and that I could like later on speak to that, right? It wasn't necessarily because like I needed that money or that like that was, a normal part of my routine. It was more of just like teach me that this was a thing, right? I could be going through a Border Patrol checkpoint and there'd be dogs all around and then they would just get a thing on the radio and I would just go straight through. Right. And I talked to other people about this in prison. Of like certain areas, certain ports of entry on the border, they'll say, okay, you go to this station on this night and you go in this lane and you could have a car full of heroin and just get straight through. Like, so a lot of people in that prison I was there with, they were aware of this sort of stuff happening as well. They just had maybe like not followed the rules or gone in the wrong lane or just been too high to like continue. But I met a guy that he said he took cars full of heroin 47 times, and he got caught on his 48th time because he didn't drive in the right lane, right? And so he knew all about how this works. He knew all about how there's elements of our government colluding with the cartels and just letting this stuff right through. And at the highest level, what that is the CIA, and they're raising money so that if they want to go give a bunch of terrorists $2.5 million per shot missiles, that money doesn't come straight off the books in a traceable manner. And if they want to go, bribe people or hire assassins or do whatever, the CIA jackals, I like to use that term from the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, whatever the jackals want to do around the globe, they have the money to do it, and they have the money to do it covertly because it's not coming through the traditional congressional appropriation. It's coming from these drug cartels.
Got it. So then when did you decide to like gather, your crew together at operating base Geronimo?
I did that whenever I was taken by the FBI SWAT team, right? So I made this video, the data video, essentially calling for a boycott, which I would say is very much in line with things that everyone else does. Especially organizations like Media Matters, right? If you look at the letter they just put out, their boycott right now, where they're threatening reputational damage to these companies if they don't leave Fox News, is exactly what the definition of the interstate communications with the intent to extort charge that I pled to. They're doing exactly that, and the FBI never cares. So I was using flamboyant language, kind of like mirroring some of the I would say DNC hit squads that I saw out there. And so I called for a phone call and an email campaign against a company who their tech support people said that, hey, we know you've paid for a year in advance. We know you haven't violated the terms of service, but we got called by the CIA and threatened to take that stuff down, and so we did, and we canceled your account. That's what their senior support engineer told me. And he said, this isn't a technical thing, like I'm on your side, but this is a legal issue. So I said, hey, here's their public phone, their public email, give them a call and help us get our files back, right? Peaceful activism, not in person, right? Everybody was freaking out about the January 6th stuff. What I was doing was all digital. And sure, a few days later, I have an FBI SWAT team, kicking down my door, coming to my house with 20 agents armed to the teeth, taking all my phone's computers, throwing me in jail, trying not to let me out. And so after that, I needed I had traditionally before that like to be kind of a lone wolf, and after that, I realized I need help. I need to rely on this awesome movement that is building here. And so that was kind of the genesis of the Geronimo one, as we like to call it. Mm-hmm. And so I got some people out here. We started doing some YouTube stuff. Obviously, I was stuck on ankle tracker, right? And one of the ideas of getting that space, that big house, was that I wanted more space to walk around while I was on house arrest, right? I had been at my other house, and they were being, the officer was being so strict, the pretrial services officer, that, I would take my dumpster from my garage to the curb on trash day, and he would try to violate me, right? So it's this crazy unconstitutional system where they can just, you're guilty until proven innocent. They can essentially incarcerate you in your own home or in the prison until trial, and then they can just drag out the trial as long as they want. So I needed help. I had these crazy restrictions. So I brought in some people to help me out and to be kind of helping spread the message. And we tried to get people targeting different demographics. So people targeting kind of the spiritual community, people targeting more of the middle-aged guys, trash talking, chopping it up community. Just various little pieces of the puzzle here. And we ended up getting that horse ranch. I thought it was kind of funny because I'm kind of a dorky guy that likes to, make a lot of jokes. And so the horse ranch thing, we were thinking we have this other big house or we could get this horse ranch, and we were being called a cult at the time. So I thought it would be pretty hilarious to just get the horse ranch and give me a little bit more room to gallop. And, in hindsight, that ended up for me having to talk to a bunch of people's parents that were concerned about why they were coming out to this horse ranch with me and whose horse ranch that was. It was just an Airbnb, so it really could have been any house out there. Mm-hmm. But the idea of that was that we could keep the movement going and keep it growing while I had these crazy restrictions and this legal action looming over my head.
Isn't there also a studio? I feel like I remember a video of there was in kind of a relative, an office building, a studio.
Yep. We've had people from all over the place, really high quality media professionals. I'm not going to say exactly who, I'm not going to put them on the spot, but that have studios all over the Phoenix area that are, willing to let us come use that for free because they just are on board with the Q movement. So that's a big thing, I think, that isn't being demonstrated right now. I feel like a lot of people are feeling very ostracized by the media coverage, but there is way, way, way more people from all walks of life, including high-quality professionals of every flavor, that follow this Q stuff very closely. And I think if we can make it a little bit more palatable, if we can refocus on kind of some of the big tent, sort of the forward-looking aspects of what we're trying to do here, that we can get these people to come out of the woodworks in support of us.
Well, talk to me about, you mentioned there were allegations that you were running a cult. I mean, so these were people who were concerned that their children were getting involved in your group?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who's like, hey, mom, dad, I'm going to go move to Arizona, because we had people from all over the country, and I'm going to live at this ranch, and, we're going to do this Q stuff. Obviously, the Q stuff, if you just would Google it on Wikipedia, since we get a lot of other stuff censored, it's overwhelmingly negative. They cast an overwhelmingly negative light, where it seems dangerous and scary. So we just had to, have people out. We would let anyone's parents come. Family, friends, whoever, just to, see hey, look, we're just a bunch of dorky YouTube people making some videos over here and, putting some press releases out. It's not anything crazy happening here. And kind of the idea of this is to support me as I'm on house arrest. It wasn't that we're going to live together forever. Anybody could leave at any time, right? So just having people come see that for themselves and feel the energy there, the synergy and the excitement, I think really helped allay a lot of people's family members' concerns. And make that a lot more of a palatable thing.
So at some point, I feel like there was a big breakup among the Steinbart people, where it was a bunch of people left and all this kind of stuff. I mean, what happened there?
It was just a few people. So a few people, I can't say who. I'm not going to dox them on here, but 3 or 4 of the people were working with the FBI to try to lock me up.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, actually, the reason I went back to jail in the first place is because they put a hidden camera in my house and took a picture of me drinking a beer. And so I was not supposed to be drinking alcohol. I was on pretrial services. Pretty outrageous, unconstitutional sort of a thing, but that is the rule. So what ended up getting me locked back up wasn't even the Wizinator thing. It was the fact that they had this picture of me drinking alcohol, and then when they were stripping me out to go put me in the jumpsuit later on in the day, they found that other stuff. Right? So I was going back in there regardless of the drug test situation, because they had a picture from a hidden camera in my kitchen of me standing in the kitchen of my house drinking a beer. And that was kind of what was the genesis of me going back for 7 months. Right? So it's pretty crazy. They can say, okay, we can get unlimited deferrals. So I wasn't at the time even indicted. Right? So you're supposed to get indicted pretty quick. It had been 6 months. I wasn't indicted. I was going through a divorce. Had a lot of stuff. So I drank a beer, right? And they get a picture of that, and they can use that to throw me back in jail, right? So it's essentially this guilty until proven innocent situation. And on the basis of that picture, this very stickler judge named Judge Michelle Burns ruled that, oh, I was unlikely to follow any of the rules of my release because I was drinking, and clearly I didn't care that they had told me not to drink.
Wow. I mean, that must make you kind of paranoid. People, I mean, I know if in my house, I had people, just snapping pictures of me all the time secretly.
Yeah, it was breach of trust, but I guess, that's I take full responsibility for that too, right? Because it's my job to make sure that kind of stuff isn't happening. And I was just, screwing around and sort of aloof at the time as far as that security protocols are concerned. Like we had people vetted, we made people give us their driver's license, and we ran like basic background checks, like did social media checks. But if people were coming in, posing as friends and working as for the FBI, then we didn't have a really good way to vet that at the time. And I should have anticipated, considering I'm the person who talks about how that's exactly how the FBI rolls, that that was going to happen. So, that I took responsibility for that one. And I ended up spending 7 months in prison as a result. And it's pretty crazy because I was looking to go to trial, right? I was thinking like, all right, FBI, like, let's dance, right? Like zero members of any jury are going to think that sending phone calls and emails as part of a political activism campaign constitutes extortion. So by all means, let's go to trial. And we were supposed to originally go to trial in November. And the judge ruled that I needed a laptop since they were taking sound bites from YouTube videos, which pretty much all their evidence was just public, social media posts and YouTube videos in its entirety. He ruled, because I was defending myself, right? I said I want to represent myself. I think I'm going to do the best job. And it allowed me to get the people who were working inside my house, get their names unsealed in my discovery. Right, because before I was representing myself, they had only the lawyer was allowed to see it, and I wasn't. And he wasn't allowed to tell me who it was. So I was able to get that unsealed. And I was able to, I just thought I would be, better at defending myself. And so the judge ruled, okay, we're going to delay your trial from November to February because you need a laptop computer in the prison, right, to be able to prepare for your trial, to be able to see the digital evidence they have against you because of those video clips, and to be able to adequately defend yourself. So he pushes my trial 3 months through the holidays, and then he comes back a few weeks later. It's like, oh, actually, I decided you don't need a laptop, so just pretty much screw you. And so it's like, how is that, justice if I'm supposed to be representing myself and you won't even let me see any of the evidence you're bringing against me? How is that a constitutional thing? Second, I never waived my right to a speedy trial, and there's no agreement on that. And the fact that the judges can just delay the trial for any reason, right? They can just go find some obscure provision in order to supersede a bedrock constitutional principle. That should be scary to everyone, right? So they came back, and the judge on my birthday on January 14th, he delayed my trial again from February to June. And so at that point, right after January 20th, like end of January, early February, prosecutors came back at me and they're like, all right, so tell you what, we will drop all of your charges except for one, because they had 7 on there. And we will let you out immediately, like expedited. We won't make you go through the normal rigmarole for sentencing and that. If you plead guilty to this, and if you don't, there's a strong possibility that your trial is going to be delayed to next year. So this was, with this particular prosecutor, this deal was offered to a few different people I knew in sort of the white collar crimes area. And I was like, I know this is how shady you guys are. I know you guys don't have to follow any of your own rules. I know you guys don't care about the Constitution. So whatever, write it up. And I was looking forward to beating you guys in the court of law, but I guess I'll have to just beat you in the court of public opinion now. And so I said, okay, write it up, and made that happen. And a couple other guys that, were in there with me, they said, no, we still want to go to trial. And sure enough, that week, their trial got moved to February of 2022. In February of 2021, boom. All right, now your trial's a year later. So some of these guys, they had been in there for 16 months already, right, pending trial. Some of these guys had shown clear exonerating evidence, and this is how the feds operate. They could just railroad anybody at any time for any reason that can throw you in jail for 3 years, right, before you ever get to even have an opportunity to defend yourself. And so that's, like, for my sake, that's why I just decided, I think them extorting me into pleading for extortion is, like, the ultimate irony. And I think that we can really use this to show, like, look, this is Media Matters MO 24/7, and they get away with it, nonstop, and we get, have this ticky-tacky stuff coming at us, and just, like, use it as a mechanism to demonstrate how ridiculous the FBI is and how unjust the courts are.
So tell me about the Wizinator situation. Obviously, you were concerned you were going to blow on the urine test for marijuana, so you bought this, kind of fake penis.
I had it in my possession. I can't speak to whether or not I'd used that or succeeded it before. I just got to let it be. But I can say at this point in time, based on my current probation restrictions, I'm all clean. I am, playing by the book here. This interview, as a matter of fact, was approved by the probation officer. So I'm not violating my social media / media ban, whatever. And so this was a pre-approved thing, and this is all okay according to them.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. So you were in jail when the QAnon shaman, or the Q shaman, Jake, was became kind of a national figure. I feel like I was shocked in general just to be like, oh, that's the Q shaman, and there he is. I mean, how did you feel? Obviously, you know him. I mean, what was your reaction to that?
My reaction was that I was, like, pretty shocked that he was in there. He's normally, like, a pretty, like, peaceful guy, right? I don't think necessarily he did anything that outrageous besides, like, walk in the building with some other people after some Capitol Police let them in. He's very polite. He's very vigilant about, like, not letting anybody steal anything, like, as far as in his little circle. And he has this cartoon spear, like a costume spear, right? So it's not even a real spear. It's like a movie prop that he carries around. It's not a deadly weapon. So I was pretty shocked to see, like, them go after him that vigorously. And it was interesting because before he came in there, I was known as, like, oh, just that white boy that is, like, going after the CIA and the FBI and, like, doing YouTube stuff. Like, my unit manager knew who I was, the warden knew who I was, like, a lot of people in the the various pods knew who I was. When he came in there, it turned from a just, like, generic taking on the CIA and the FBI to, like, oh, this is Q. This is the guy. This is, like, who that guy was following, right? Because we have that picture of us in front of the courthouse with the Q sent me sign. So that's when it transitioned into, like, a Q thing as opposed to just a generic political activism thing. And it really turbocharged the conversation in that prison, right? Everybody was interested. Like, we had guards coming in from other units, like, wanting to meet me and, be like, hey, I've been following Q for, since 2017. I got a Q sticker on my car in the parking lot. This is crazy. This is so cool right now. And they would ask me for stuff. So I had some of those email clips from the MRS archive, right? Some of those flamboyant things we were doing in 2016. So I could, like, show people a few things about the sorts of activism campaigns we engage in, and some of the corruption that we expose. But it was very interesting. And I had a really good relationship with the unit staff in my unit. And I was trying to get him moved out of solitary into my unit, right? Because we had a pretty good situation. We did a pretty good job keeping the racial beefing to a minimum. Right. In that prison, there's probably, like, 2 to 3 helicopters a week taking people out that get stabbed. So like in our specific unit, we were pretty good at like keeping the lid on that and like, talking stuff out amongst the racists so that things didn't escalate out of control. And so I wanted him to be in there with us. And I guess it was straight from the warden and straight from the people up, the higher ups above that. He is required to be in solitary confinement, period. Right. And to this day, he's sitting in solitary confinement. Right. And they're saying that they're claiming that it's for his safety, like it's a protective custody sort of a deal. They tried to do that to me too when I first got there. They tried to put me in protective custody, but I talked the guards out of it. The initial guard checking me in happened to be a Q fan, so I talked him out of like putting me in protective custody. But apparently Jake is not getting out of solitary, and I don't know that he has a trial date yet. So essentially, they're just torturing this guy in solitary, like unending solitary, and trying to give him like 27 years for just walking inside of a building and holding a flag and chanting and just doing pretty normal activism sort of types of stuff, right? If you look at the videos on that day, like he wasn't stealing things, he wasn't breaking things, he wasn't attacking people, he wasn't doing anything like that. So I really feel like he's just getting extremely railroaded, and I wish more people would stand up for him. But obviously his lawyer has taken a very controversial line of like calling everybody in the Q movement like mentally retarded and like short bus people and all this. So he's burning, like his lawyer is burning his bridge to the Q community who might defend him. And then obviously the mainstream is viewing him as like this insurrectionist. So they're not going to defend him. So he really doesn't have a lot of like friends out there in the public sphere right now. And I just think, I meeting the guy, he's a nice guy. He's a very like, if you ever go to like a football game, like the fan section, like a Raiders game, like that's kind of how I look at that. Very enthusiastic, like hilarious guy that definitely does not deserve to get, he doesn't deserve to get 1 year, let alone 27 years, right? Maybe if you wanted to write him a ticket for being in somewhere that he wasn't supposed to be, that might be proportionate. But the idea that they're trying to charge him with all this extra stuff and trying to lock him up for 27 years and they're torturing him essentially in solitary confinement is just outrageous and unacceptable. And just a demonstration of how politicized the FBI has gotten and how their response to things, a lot of times, like the severity of their response is driven a lot by media coverage or by political considerations and not by, objective measures of justice. So another example, he was a good example of showing like how ridiculous the courts are too, because we listened into a hearing that he had the other day, like a detention hearing, and his lawyer tried to submit footage that he had gotten as he was walking in of the cops, the Capitol Police, letting them in the building. Like how he didn't break in, how they let him walk straight in the building. And the judge says, oh, no, I don't need to see that video. I don't need to see this evidence that you're bringing forth. I saw on CNN and Washington Post that that wasn't the case. Right? So what kind of like bastardization of justice is that, where the judge is refusing firsthand evidence and in favor of saying like, I saw media coverage at my house, right? And would say that is so brazen they would verbalize that out loud. Like that's crazy. If you were a juror and you said that, you'd be dismissed immediately, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're the judge and you're saying that and you're acting like that, you should be dismissed immediately too. And so I really think his case has done a good job exposing yet again, just how corrupt our criminal justice system is and how it's really not fair and it's really not objective whatsoever.
So, speaking of the QAnon community, obviously you are a controversial figure, even among other QAnon believers and QAnon promoters. I mean, I think you may be the only person, or at least the most visible one, to say that you are Q. And I think that's kind of set people like Jordan Sather, Dustin Nemos, that's kind of set them off. I mean, what do you think it is about, about you that has made you such a controversial figure within QAnon?
I think that a lot of them were viewing Q as like this deity or like Jesus coming down from heaven or like the Oracle from the Matrix. So the idea that it would just be a person was very offensive to them. So I think that was the first element of it. The second one is I think a lot of these influencers, I won't name any names because I'm trying to be magnanimous lately, they make their money, right? They're living off of this. So I think I'm a direct threat to their living. If you could just come listen to me say stuff for free instead of pay them for their often incorrect analysis on things, then, they're losing their stream of income, or that's like their entire life. They've kind of like jumped in full steam on that, even though specifically in the Q boards, there's posts relating to the fact they call it patriots, like PAY triots, and it says, do people who ask for monthly payments to remain patriots, are they actually patriots, right? So there's a lot of stuff in there like that eschews, earning incomes off of the movement, but they still do that anyways, and they kind of, it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I grew up in a very like evangelical Christian church, right? There's a lot of good people. There's also a lot of people that like to cherry pick the parts of the Bible that they agree with and use it to, go after people that they don't like. And I feel like that's essentially what's happening here with some of these Q drops. They like to cherry pick the parts that they like and go after the people that they don't. And so it's an interesting phenomena. It's been an interesting phenomena how they really rail against the mainstream media, right? One of the ideas is like 4 a.m. talking points, right? That the media is colluding around how the narrative is being framed in a lot of ways and how upset they are by that. But then they have these little, Twitter and Telegram groups where the main influencers in the Q movement, they literally collude and have their same kind of 4 a.m. talking points. So I think it's an interesting case study on, I guess, just human behavior, I guess, and tribalism of this is, when there's any sort of group that gets outsized influence, unless it's aggressively like checked and less people make an active effort to police that, this is kind of a natural phenomenon that develops, whether it's the mainstream media or whether it's the Q influencers.
So it seems to me like your second arrest, or the arrest in which you were sort of permanently jailed for a year or so, that really kind of put a crimp in your movement's growth. I mean, I feel like there was a lot of YouTube shows and this kind of stuff, and then for various reasons, you had to just be calling in from jail, this kind of stuff. I mean, basically, what happened to SMG while you were in jail, and what's next?
Well, I think the biggest thing that put a crimp in our movement is the like severe censorship we've been experiencing on YouTube, on Twitter, on wherever. I know SMG does this thing called Q therapy, right? Where it's essentially like a Saturday night like rave, right? Where it's like people playing music, it's over like visual overlays, and YouTube won't even let that on there, right? The second that goes on YouTube, YouTube censors that off. So like we kind of have this like extreme target on us from Twitter, from YouTube, from all the mainstream kind of platforms of they do not want us to be able to speak whatsoever, even if it's like there's a rave dance party, right? That's totally benign by every measurable way. It's not inciting violence. There's not even words. It's just music. They don't want that, right? They don't want it to platform anybody associated with us whatsoever. So that I think is more so than me going to prison. I think that is putting a much bigger crimp in the movement. And we've been working with some blockchain-based developers to build some site or to help promote some sites that are being built that are going to give us kind of a workaround to the censorship wall that we're experiencing, right? And then we're working on organizing, like in person, some grassroots initiatives here that will be announcing soon.
So what did you think of the QAnon documentary, which sort of posited that the Watkins family is behind Q?
I actually didn't see it. I have not seen that yet. So I've heard something about that, but I just heard that they had insinuated that the Watkins people were, and then somebody else was telling me that Watkins said that he wasn't. So I'm not really on social media, so I don't necessarily see all like the back and forth, and I have not had a chance to check out that documentary yet. So I don't know what I make of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's even what he said, or if that's just them trying to chop sound bites and frame it that way. I couldn't tell you.
So in terms of the DIA thing, I mean, you were saying you were in the DIA, and then obviously in court, you were unable to verify that employment. I mean, what was the story there?
Well, they tried to verify that I had done anything to do with that, right? So they sent me, as part of the probation office, like they try to get you to disclose all these financial records, like before they're writing up the probation report. And one of them was a release, like a military-based release, that is like if you'd ever worked for them directly, indirectly, subcontractor, anything like that in any way, they wanted to release the information on that. And I just refused to sign that entire packet. I said, you're not getting my credit reports. You're not getting any of that stuff. I don't have to sign this. I made a deal that stipulates time served, so I don't have to sign any of these releases, and I'm not going to do that. So they really didn't like do anything to check into that.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I have pictures of me, doing subcontracting like for the military base, right? So
are you employed by the DIA?
no, not directly.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, let's see. So you mentioned you got a divorce. I mean, was that caused by your role in QAnon?
It was primarily that my ex-wife, she understood a lot of this stuff, and she thought I was exposing myself and her to like unnecessarily high amount of danger. Like she was worried that like we were gonna get killed, we're gonna have a bunch of crazy people coming to our house. Like I want nothing to do with that. So it was more of a safety thing to her than it was like a disagreement with the tenets of QAnon.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that, I mean, speaking of, safety and security and all that, I feel like there was a video that's mentioned in your indictment about, like booby trapping your lawn or like putting landmines down. I mean, what was the story there?
Oh, that was just hyperbole. So that was, and I told the FBI agents that before they raided my house. I said like I wouldn't make tannerite traps. Like I showed them the yard and the rocks right there. I said that obviously I have this my right to defend myself. Use the Second Amendment to defend myself. But I didn't rig my yard with any tannerite traps. That was just some YouTube hyperbole. And so, like, ignore that, right? Because if I shot it that close, then it would just spray me with rocks, too. So they knew that was not true. And they actually used the idea, when they originally interviewed me at my house, they came to the door under the pretense, like, hey, we see that you're getting tons of death threats on YouTube, and we want to make sure you're okay, and all this stuff. And I was like, okay. So I talked to them. And then they turned around and used that and said, oh, this guy has a gun and he's threatened to use it on his YouTube video, so that's part of the reason that we need this warrant to go raid his house. When really what I said was, if you threaten my life at my house, right, I will use force to defend myself. That's essentially the message there. And I think that's a quintessentially American attitude. That is according to Arizona law, 100% legal attitude. And it's just another example of how the FBI spins totally legal behavior into their totally illegal warrants.
So what's next for you? Obviously, you're under some restrictions here. You had to get this interview approved. I mean, what? I guess how do you what's the next step for you? In QAnon.
Well, we got a series of documentaries coming out. Just on a range of topics that'll be announced when they launch. So very excited about that. Demonstrating a lot of the like concepts that we talk about. And then we got a really awesome grassroots kind of like in-person movement developing here. And so we're just trying to encourage people to like go sit together and to see like how many people from all walks of life follow this stuff, are concerned about this stuff, and would like to, come together to change some of this stuff. That's primarily what we're doing.
Okay. Well, Austin, here, let me check my questions real quick. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, is this documentary you're talking about? I remember there was a whole thing with the court, like to get you access to a computer before you were arrested again, where you were working with this other company on a QAnon documentary. Is that the same thing or is that a different thing?
There's a QAnon documentary and there's a few other ones as well. So that one is still in the works.
And what's the skyline here on the green screen? What city is this behind you?
That's Phoenix.
Oh, okay, great.
Well, awesome. Good to hear. It was great to talk to you. And if you have any more questions, feel free to drop us a line, and we'll talk sometime soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Okay, talk to you later. Thanks a lot.
Have a good one, Will.